Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but we want to give a shout out to our partners, We Coach, the Florida Coaches Coalition, Vital Signs Wall of Fame, and the Global Community of Women in High School Sports. These are four great organizations. You should really add them to your network. And now, do me a favor, don't hit that fast forward button. Stay with us for the next 3 minutes. We're going to give our sponsors a shout out. These are all great companies that I used as an athletic director. You should be using them too. Here we go. We want to say thanks to Gipper for their support of the podcast. Go to Gipper.com. Their team is going to start helping you create world-class graphics, world-class content for your school social media channel in seconds. You don't need any special training, and you can use any device. Your students are on social media. That's the reality. And if you're not on social media promoting your team, celebrating their accomplishments, you're really missing out. Go to Gipper.com. Mention this podcast. You'll get a nice discount. That's Gipper.com. We also want to thank Home Campus for their support. Home Campus is the exclusive high school and state association management platform for us. It's also your one-stop platform for things like scheduling, student-athlete eligibility and clearance, and a whole lot more. As an AD, I used Home Campus every single day, and it was just fantastic, and you'll love it too. Go to homecampus.com to get started. That's homecampus.com. We also want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. You know, they're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. Their interactive touchscreen video consoles help you showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention this podcast. You'll get a nice discount. vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check them out today. We also want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com. Their team is going to show you how to set up and sell your tickets online. And Hometown is known for more support, more security, more customization. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Their products not only generate income for your department, but they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to say thanks to Huddle. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that helped them coach our kids up to their highest level. At Huddle, we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to thank our friends at Snap Mobile. Go to snapraise.com. That's the website, and check out their entire suite of platforms designed to help you do your job better. Of course, there's Snap Raise, their fundraising platform. We used it with great success, and so can you. But there's a whole lot more. You'll find them all at snapraise.com. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Their team is going to show you how they can create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. Athletic directors already hear back from the complainers, the 2% that want to gripe about everything. Athletic surveys will connect you with the 2%, but they also connect you with the 98% that love and support your program. That's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent or your principal or your school board. You can get started by going to athleticsurveys.com. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wednesday Wisdom on the Educational AD Podcast. We have our founding Wednesday Wisdom member, Betsy Butterick, the communication coach, back. It's been a busy summer for her. She's all over the place, but we're very fortunate that she spent some time with us. Betsy, welcome back to Wednesday Wisdom. What do you have for our listeners today?
Thank you. So, as you mentioned, Jake, in my travels, there are certain themes come up, and I'll say the busy season for me is often, August into September as schools and programs kick off. And one thing that I hear consistently from coaches specifically is, there's kids these days, a lot of things that are said about kids these days, but one of those things is kids these days are afraid to hold each other accountable. And for me, as someone who's passionate about replacing judgment with understanding when it comes to today's student athlete, and we're largely coaching Gen Z currently, one of the things that comes to mind is yes, this generation of athletes prior to, or I'll say compared to any other prior, is disproportionately focused on obtaining peer validation. A lot of that has to do with the way they were raised with technology, specifically social media, and having that need for external validation in a way that was more intrinsic for previous generations. So that's one thing. I think we need to understand that that fear, if it truly is fear, is about the fear of judgment. Of if I say anything, not just holding someone accountable, but even answering a question in front of my peers that the coach has asked, that fear of judgment is so high for many of today's student athletes that the safer path is for them to say nothing at all because then they avoid the judgment. So that's sometimes why we're hearing some silence. When it comes to the accountability piece, from a language perspective, one thing I want to be really careful of is mislabeling lack of skill as fear. And so when people say, kids these days are afraid to hold each other accountable, sure, I would say that they might be nervous about it in the same way that older generations or other adults might be nervous about holding a peer accountable. For me, that it's less fear though and more lack of skill. They haven't yet been taught how to model accountability or engage in conversations about accountability in a way that is supportive for both parties. If in any room I ask student athletes, how many of you feel that accountability is important for team success? Almost every hand goes up. If I then follow up with, how many of you have had an experience with being held accountable that you feel was very negative or perhaps even traumatic? Most hands go up. So for me, it's like, okay, if we know this thing is good, but we're not doing it, it's less out of fear and more a lack of skill. So then, coach as educator, how can we help today's student athletes become more skillful in having these conversations around accountability and what needs to be true in order for these conversations to start to take place in our sporting environment?
You know, the that expression you start off with, kids today, I've got a program and I use that as a lead in too, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, the quote that's attributed to Plato complaining to his teacher Socrates about kids today, 2000 years ago. So I think that refrain is all too common, but it's not the kids' fault. And again, I don't think the kids have changed that much as to, maybe how adults, parents, coaches, et cetera, try to communicate with kids. So, you know, you've been, at a number of different levels with great success as a coach and as a communicator. Um, what's, a very quick, giveaway tool or trick or tip, I guess, for a coach or an AD who's listening, maybe for an AD that they can pass on to their coaches to help them, not miscommunicate when they're talking to kids today.
Mm. Yeah, and this shows up a lot too is great intention and then unintended miscommunication. So the impact that our words have or the conversation we think we had and yet it was received very differently. One thing I would say as a tip or kind of a takeaway tool would be whenever possible, and I would argue in most scenarios it is possible, it simply requires our awareness and a little bit of our time, check for clarity and not check for clarity in the sense of does that make sense question mark or got it question mark, but really ask an intentional question or series of questions to be able to make sure that the person is walking away from that conversation with the understanding that you intended for them to have, not the understanding that they've interpreted along the way. Classic example, the way that this shows up in a detrimental way for, I'll say, both coach and student athlete, although you could take it into different contexts, is when, let's say, a coach has a conversation with a student athlete about their playing time. And they're very clear with what needs to happen in order for that individual to upskill to the point that they're now competitive for playing time. Okay. And they even go so far as to check with that student athlete, so what's your understanding of what needs to happen? And then they articulate back to them everything they heard. Great. So both people walk away from that conversation. What the coach thinks is, okay, they understand what they need to do. What the student athlete often leads with is not, if I do these things, then we'll reevaluate. It's, when I do these things, then I will play, which is a different expectation than oftentimes the coach intended for them to have. So I think checking for clarity to make sure that the information was received as intended. And if you want to go bonus step, it's ask about expectations. And it can be as simple as asking the question, great, given our conversation today, what are your expectations moving forward? And when we ask that question, now we're getting clarity on the unknown, the thing that if we didn't ask, we might find ourselves, a certain time period down the road having disappointment or frustration or animosity when there didn't need to be, simply because there were expectations that weren't met. Challenges, those expectations were also unspoken and unknown. So can we check for clarity? And then can we also ask about somebody else's expectations so that we're better able to meet each other in a place that's intended?
Boy, great stuff. It almost makes me wish I was back as an AD so I could pass it on to our coaches. But hopefully they're listening to this episode. Betsy, you have so many great resources available. I just listened to your presentation, I guess maybe a week or two ago on the global community, coaching Generation Z kids. Great stuff. If one of our listeners wanted to follow up, find out more information about all the things that you do and have available, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Absolutely. I would recommend going to betsybutterick.com. From the website, you can link to all of my social media. You can also link to some of the ACT videos that are on YouTube. There's 40 currently, active communication techniques, and those are short videos designed to give anybody something that they can do today to impact the way that we communicate and connect with each other. So if you're looking for what's a short, accessible, way that I can start to become a better communicator, I would say start with the ACT videos on YouTube, but also go to the website so that you can connect in a way that works for you to find what you're looking for.
Absolutely. BetsyButterick.com, and check out those ACT videos on YouTube. If you're looking for an A-list speaker for your school, your organization, you need to get a hold of Betsy Butterick. She will knock it out of the park for you. Betsy, always great catching up with you. Hoping we can get you down here to Florida soon, but keep on leading. And thanks again for coming on, sharing with us on Wednesday Wisdom.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
For listeners, we do this every single week, and we upload the episodes to our YouTube channel, the Educational AD Podcast. Of course, we appreciate you listening. Come back next time for more great wisdom on Wednesday Wisdom, and just about every day on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time. Always a great time with Betsy Butterick. That website is betsybutterick.com. You really need to check it out if you haven't done so. Before we go, we do want to give our sponsors a shout out one more time. Home Campus, go to homecampus.com. Athletic clearance, coach management, scheduling, you name it, go to homecampus.com. Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards, go to sidelineinteractive.com. Hometown Ticketing is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com for more information. We want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. At my school, we use surveys for just about everything, and the information that we gathered was tremendously valuable. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Huddle. As a football coach, I used it. As an athletic director, we were a Huddle school. Go to huddle.com. See all the ways that they can help you and your coaches coach your kids. Vital Signs Wall of Fame. They're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life, whether it's school record boards, Hall of Fames, or just telling your school story. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention this podcast. You'll get a nice discount. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Snap Mobile. Go to snapraise.com. That's the website, SnapRaise. Check out their entire suite of platforms, including their fundraising platform, which is hands down the best one out there, snapraise.com. And our good friends at Gipper. Go to gipper.com. Start creating custom content for your school's social media channel. If you mention this podcast, they will give you a nice discount. That's gipper.com. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Wednesday Wisdom. We'll see you next time on the Educational AD Podcast.